Hello everyone, Nightspin again. I apologize for the delay, but I'm back again, and with a no-sleep horror reading. Looks like we're going to have a couple of stories on our hands. Now just sit back, relax, get ready for some horror. First story today, we have a bit of a quarantine-filled adventure. I left the house during quarantine, and something followed me home. Please help. I don't know what to do at this point. Bit of context. I'm a junior in high school, and currently my school is on a spring break of sorts where they aren't doing online classes. That's nice and all. But I'm extremely bored all day because of it. So to compensate for that, I've been taking random drives around town. I like driving. It's calming. So anyways, yesterday I decided to take my skateboard to my old middle school and skate around. Because I can't practice curbs in my garage. It's a big place and pretty secluded for a school. I got there, and just as I suspected, there was nobody there. I did notice a random white car parked in the lot, but there was nobody in it. I passed it off as nothing. I brought my speaker and board, and I started cruising around, doing ollies and whatnot. I'm sort of a beginner. Best trick I can do is a shaky shove it. I was taking a break on one of the benches outside, listening to music and scrolling on my phone when I had the random thought that I should look inside the windows of the school. I was a lot smaller and more innocent in middle school, so it might be interesting to see the inside with fresh eyes. I walked up to the first window and squinted, placing my hand on the glass. Inside the room was a table, some chairs, a whiteboard with random notes still on it, and an extra large soda cup like the kind you'd get at, cringy movies. This, of course, caused me to cringe, imagining that the soda was still in there, fermenting. My eyes lingered on the soda cup before something caught the corner of my eye. I looked at the doorway and stopped. There was a man. He was just standing there, completely naked, penis hanging out and everything. Ugh. He had to be around 6'2" or 6'3". Judging from his position in the room and proportionally muscled, he was completely hairless, bald up top, no eyebrows or facial hair. But what stopped me was his eyes. They never blinked, never twitched, just stared directly at me. I shivered. I slowly backed away from the window, not taking my eyes off the man. Once I was back at the bench, I quickly grabbed my stuff and ran to my car. I stayed locked in the car for a while, just parked in the lot. Needless to say, I was more than a little freaked out. Who was that guy? Why was he naked? Why was he in the school? Why did he stare at me like that? I started the car up and drove home. I tried playing music in the car, but my mind kept going back to the guy. When I got home, I stayed in the kitchen where my mom was cooking dinner. I didn't want to be alone for some reason. During dinner is when I saw him again. I was eating my food, staring at my bowl hazily as my parents and my brother talked about some TV show. Then something again caught my eye. From the very corners of my vision, I saw him. He was sitting on my couch, body turned away from me, head cocked in an unnatural manner towards me, staring. I quickly looked directly at the couch, only to see nothing. Now he was in the hallway, getting the peripherals of my vision, still naked and still staring. My parents didn't seem to notice anything. I stayed at the table for as long as I could before finally getting up and going to the bonus room to play some Xbox. He was still in the bonus room with me. This time, sitting on the floor by the wall, hairless legs pulled up to his chest. He never made any noise, never shifted at all. But I can tell he was a little bit different. definitely was not human. I don't know how to explain it, but his hands were too big. His head was a little too small, and his nose was a little too flat. Not enough to be noticeable, of course, but enough that after sitting with him in the bonus room for an hour, I could make it out. That night I tried to sleep. I slept facing away from my wall. He lurked in the dark corner of my room. If I slept on my back, he stood right next to my bed. I tried sleeping facing the wall, as there was no place for him to be. I was wrong. When I lied on my side facing the wall, he sat at the foot of my bed. I had decided on sleeping away from the wall, since in that position he was farthest away from me, and he stayed that way the whole night, staring at me from the darkness. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't know what would happen to me if I closed my eyes, if he would get closer. So that brings us to now. I'm writing this on my bed. He's still standing in the corner of my room, watching. I can tell that his features are more defined. He seems to be getting bolder, as if he's testing how far into my vision he can be. When I looked at him for that long at the school, he must have become latched onto me somehow. If only I hadn't looked into that window. Nobody else sees him, and he doesn't show up into his pictures. I've tried. Please help. And update. Thank you for the suggestions. I'll make an update post when I can. I have to wait until tomorrow to actually try any of these suggestions, because he becomes 100% more unsettling at night. People think I'm a serial killer. It's far worse than that. Part 1. I won't tell you my name. If you watch the news regularly, you probably already know it. I'm rather famous right now. Or perhaps, more appropriately, infamous. The media has been covering my stories for months, and I've been in all the major newspapers. My name is a source of heated debate. People discuss me in the office break room, and at bars and restaurants. Housewives scare each other with stories of me when they get together for lunch, embellishing my crimes, consulting their imaginations to conjure up the most lucid details they can come up with to get a rise out of their friends. I've been featured on all the big real-life crime shows, and variously esteemed professionals in the psychiatric field and criminal profiles have sat down to talk with talk show hosts and major network news pundits to offer their own insights and theories into what makes me tick, what caused me to become what I am. I won't keep you in suspense. I'll just come out and say it. I'm what most people would call a serial killer. I was apprehended 10 months ago after committing 40 murders in 10 states over an 8-year period, and I'm currently locked up in a federal prison. My murder trial is in progress, and the odds are not in my favor. There's a ton of evidence against me. Chances are good that I'll be convicted and probably sentenced to death. People are already comparing me to the likes of Bundy, Gacy, Gein, and Dahmer. I have to be escorted into the courthouse with armed guards and wearing a bulletproof vest because of death threats made against me by the grieving relatives of my victims. The outside courthouse is a circus whenever we arrive. Various journalists, spectators, and curiosity seekers, freaks, you name it, are crowded around the front of the building in hundreds. My trial is being televised, and my lawyer has told me it's the media event of the decade. Like I'm supposed to be proud of that. I couldn't care less. Yes, I did commit these murders. All 40 of them, in fact. I won't deny it. No, I'm not a sociopath or a psychotic. I didn't hear voices telling me to do it. I didn't do it because God told me to do it in a dream to cleanse the world of sin. I didn't do it because I was trying to impress a celebrity or my dog told me to. And I didn't do it for political reasons or to try and incite a race war like Manson did either. I did it because I had to. Someone had to do it. I killed 40 people, but none of them were human. Maybe I should back up a bit and explain. I guess you can say I had a pretty rough beginning. I know that's standard because most serial killers try to use that to justify their behavior. But it's the truth. It all started when I was 8. That was when I lost my vision. My childhood was a living hell. I grew up dirt poor, on the wrong side of the tracks, as they say. My old man was a no-good drunken redneck who had trouble holding down a steady job because of his alcoholism. He wasn't articulate enough to express his frustrations with his life situation in words, so he instead used his fists and hands on me and my mother to do it. For her part, my mother was a spineless asswipe who would rather stick with a man who routinely used her and her only child as a punching bag than leave him and try raising me on her own. I often showed up to school with bruises and an occasional black eye, but none of my teachers did crap about it because my family was poor, white trash, on welfare, so why would they give a shit? To her credit, my school principal did try to get to the police involved, but whenever they or social services showed up, my dad would always weasel his way out of it with some excuse or another, and my mom always backed him up. Then, after they left, he would beat the shit out of me for trying to start up trouble. If I had any say in calling the principal again. It all came up to a head one summer when I was 8. I was out in the garage, playing with my old man's tools like most little kids will, pretending I was a plumber or a repairman or whatever. My dad stumbled in, drunk, saw his tools scattered around, and decided the most reasonable course of action was to pick up a pipe wrench and proceed to bash me in with it. I blacked out. When I woke up from my coma, 3 days later in the hospital, it was still black. At first I thought I had trouble opening my eyes or I had a bandage over them. But that's when I put up my eyes to feel them. And I realized there was no bandage covering my eyes, and they were wide open. I began to freak out. The doctors explained to me that the vision center of my brain had been severely damaged in the beating, and that I would never see again. My dad went to prison for that. He was sentenced to 25 years for attempted murder, but only served 2.5 before someone took exception to child beaters, stuck a shiv in his throat in the cafeteria. In my opinion, the bastard got off way too easy. He was dead, and I was sentenced to a lifetime of being blind. I guess having to take care of a blind kid was too much of a hassle for my mom, because she packed her bags and took off before I was even discharged from the hospital. I never, pardon the pun, saw her again. After that, I went to live with my maternal grandparents. They were a decent enough couple, but they weren't much better than my folks had been. My grandma wanted to send me to a special school. It was for blind kids, where they teach them how to adjust to life in a world after losing sight. But those places cost money. That was something my grandparents didn't have much of to spare. Still, my childhood with them was a major improvement compared to the living hell I had endured before. They raised me as best as they could, and tried to educate me on their own. They were country people, and well, not to sound ungrateful, not particularly bright. And it's not like I could attend a regular school in my condition. My grandpa died in a car accident caused by a drunk driver when I was 11. And then my grandma tried to raise me on her own until she died of a stroke when I was 15. After that, I was sent to live in a state-funded group home, which was just a fancy modern term for an orphanage. There, my life returned to a living hell for the next 3 years as I endured abuse from the other kids, such as bullies taking advantage of my disability, while the overworked, underpaid staff, once again, pardon the pun, turned a blind eye. The administration tried to set me up with a foster family on several occasions. I guess most people don't find the idea of taking in a blind teenager very appealing. When I was 18 and legally an adult, the group home kicked me out, leaving me to fend for myself, which was no easy task for a blind guy with no real education or skills. I did the only thing I could think of. I turned to panhandling. I'd stand on the sidewalk with a cardboard sign a store owner had made for me out of pity, begging anyone who walked by. Getting by on the charity of others, as I was to find out the hard way in this day and age, actually didn't have a lot of people who had much charity to spare or compassion. I've been spit upon, insulted, called names, told to get a real job, and accused of faking my blindness for sympathy. A couple of times I even got beaten up. I guess just for kicks. It was pretty much just like it had been in the group home. For all I know, it even might have been the same kids. One hard lesson I've learned in my life is that some people never change. If you're born an asshole, you're going to die an asshole. There are some people who still have the spark of kindness in their hearts, though, and I usually make just enough by the day to buy a meal. Mostly I slept outside using the narrow space behind a dumpster for shelter, bundling up in trash and old newspapers to stay warm. A few times, someone was kind enough to guide me to a nearby homeless shelter, so I wouldn't freeze in sub-zero weather. That was pretty much how my life went for the next 10 years. I was pretty bitter about it for a while, wondering if this was as good as it was ever going to get for me. I wondered if I would spend the rest of my life a blind beggar on a street corner, ignored by most of society, unable to even see the contemptuous expressions on faces of the people who walked by me, sleeping rough and seeing me have to forage through empty trash cans, eating the stuff others threw away on a particularly bad day. When my earnings were pretty light, I started to wish I'd never waken up from that coma, that my dad had just killed me. I started to contemplate suicide, thinking about just stepping into the road anytime I heard the sound of an approaching engine. I might have done it too, until I met him, the doctor. He came up to me one day, after I'd been pretty aggressively told off by a businessman, and he told me that I was a leech upon a society who didn't contribute anything and that I should drop dead. Anyways, after the businessman dropped away, I heard someone else approach and just stand there. I could sense him looking at me. "You get that a lot?" A new voice asked me. Sounded like an older man, probably in his 50s. I could detect a faint chemical smell to his clothes, almost medicinal in nature. Uh, Most days, yeah," I replied with a shrug. He began asking me questions, how old I was, how I had lost my sight, how long I had been on the streets. I answered his questions, which were pretty standard questions I got asked all the time, by those who even bothered to speak to me at all. "You know, I might be able to help you," he told me. I figured he was just another do-gooder offering to buy me a hot meal and spare 20 minutes listening to my share of woe, or some religious type wanting to give me an uplifting speech about how Jesus hasn't abandoned me, and the Lord tests us all, and that when my trials are over, I would see you again in the kingdom of heaven. I'd been fed all that type of bullshit before, mostly by super pious middle-class churchgoers in their expensive Sunday clothes, on their way to breakfast after fulfilled their weekly duty and given lip service to God. Most of them never spared me a dime either. They probably didn't tip their server either. That's something else I learned about these people. They only care as long as they don't have to pay for it. Hypocrisy at its finest. Sorry if I sound bitter. My experience as being homeless made me pretty cynical. "Yeah," I told Ms. Riley. "How so?" "You want to give me a new pair of eyes?" I said to the doctor. "It's not your eyes that are the problem. Based on what you've told me, it's your brain that's the source of the problem." He then got down to brass tacks and asked me a question that gave me pause. "How would you like to regain your sight?" My job is to watch people die. My job is to watch people die. Once your time on this earth ends, death will greet you like an old friend, whether you embrace it with fear, hatred, or acceptance. Is a question that cannot be answered before you stand at its door. I can't tell you what comes next, nor can I offer you comforting thought about an eternal afterlife. All I can promise you is that when it happens, you won't be alone. Up until Thursday, the 6th of December, 2007, I never considered myself anything out of the ordinary. As a teacher at the local high school, the best I could hope for was to aid in building our future. Though not an easy job, it was one I loved. Then, on the evening of the 6th, as I returned home after grading a bunch of unsatisfying essays, I received a text message from a hidden number. It contained nothing more than a time, a place, and a vaguely familiar, yet generic name. Friday, 5:34 a.m., Lock Road 4, Juliet, Florence. Any logical person would have arrived at the conclusion that the message had reached the wrong recipient. Yet, as soon as I lifted the phone and read the message, a shiver shot down my spine, and something within me felt compelled beyond any reasonable explanation to go check it out. The road itself was an hour's drive out of town, situated in a desolate area, only occupied abandoned farms and barren fields. It would have been the perfect place to lure someone out and kill them without anyone ever knowing. Despite this horrible fact, I wasn't worried. All I felt was compassion for whoever else would be there, without understanding why. I couldn't accurately explain the immense feeling of purpose that had arisen within me. It was an odd mixture of unrelenting fear, sadness, and pity. It felt as if my entire life had led to that very moment, and that nothing mattered more than being at that location, at that time. Friday morning arrived, and I'd been lying in bed without a minute of sleep, in anticipation of what would happen. As 4 a.m. rolled around, I attempted to sneak my way out of bed, careful not to wake my sleeping wife, Anna. Of course, it was a futile attempt, with Anna being the lightest sleeper on the planet, able to sense my thoughts. and waking up because she claimed they were too loud. "Alex, what's wrong?" she asked without even opening her eyes. Uh, Nothing's wrong. I just need to catch up on some papers," I lied. "But why would you think something's wrong?" "You had a worried breath," she mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. I let a brief smile slip and kissed her on the forehead. "Everything is great, Anna. I'll see you after work. All right?" She mumbled something incoherent in response, and I left the house. Secrets had never been an aspect of our 5-year-long marriage, but on that particular day, I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. On the hour-long drive over Lock Road, 1,000 questions flew through my mind. Who had sent the message? Why did Juliet Florence sound so familiar? And what compelled me enough to risk following the instructions, or lack thereof, from such a cryptic message? It was a dark journey through the barely illuminated skies of dawn. Though the sun still hadn't peeked up from the horizon, it still gave the sky a deep blue hue. Once I got close enough to my destination, I noticed something down the road. It was a car that had flipped over, crushed under its own force, and had crashed into the ditch. I stopped my car and quickly approached the wreck, already preparing to dial 911. "Help!" a weak voice called from the car. In the driver's seat, between the dashboard, steering wheel, and seat, sat a woman with a large piece of metal protruding through her chest. The debris had lodged itself into the seat, making it impossible to get loose. But even removing it would almost certainly have killed her, as it was the only thing keeping her from bleeding out. With shaking hands, I called for an ambulance. We were practically in the middle of nowhere, meaning it would take an ambulance almost half an hour just to arrive, which would be more time than the poor woman had left. "It hurts so much," she cried weakly. A feeling of helplessness had washed over me, as the fact of her imminent death had became abundantly clear. I could do nothing but keep her company as the life drained from her body. I didn't think it would be like this," she said. "I'm so scared." "Oh, you'll be alright. Help is on the way," I lied. She reached out, trying to remove the piece of metal lodged into her chest, worsening the bleeding. "You have to lie still." Despite my order, she kept trying to move, mumbling incoherently to herself. I decided my best bet would be keep her mind occupied on simple questions, keeping her mind working as we waited for help that couldn't possibly get here on time. What's her name?" Uh, uh, "Juliet. What's yours?" Uh, "I'm Alex. What were you doing all the way out here?" "Alex? Oh, no, I'm sorry," she said senselessly, barely audible, before she started to lose consciousness. No, Julia, stay awake." I said it loud and with purpose, awaking her for just a moment. Despite the last few seconds of her life, she just stared into my eyes and whispered for the second time, "I'm sorry." Then she stopped breathing. I could do nothing except wait for the ambulance to arrive. I felt numb, empty after having so futilely witnessed someone's life end suddenly and unexpectedly. The emergency services came to the scene and took her lifeless body away, while the police asked me a couple of questions to clarify what had happened. She seemed so familiar. She responded so oddly when I told her my name, but I couldn't really put a finger on it. I returned home without going to work. Anna had the day off and immediately noticed something was off about me. I broke down and told her about the accident. I told her I'd watched that poor woman die, confused and afraid, and that I could do nothing to help. What I didn't tell her was that a text message had told me to be there. Not that she wouldn't believe me, but because something deep had prevented me from uttering the words. She embraced me, tried to comfort me by saying I did my best to help her, that at least she didn't die alone. It was a minor detail, but hadn't I been there, she might just have faded away, rotting for days before anyone else passed down that desolate road. I should have been the end of it. Weeks passed, and I slowly got over the trauma. Then when I headed back to work one cold morning in January 2008, I received another message. It contained a time, a place, and a name. Jeremy Brooks. This time, the address was a local motel, only 5 minutes away. I wasted no time and called an ambulance, then got in my car to drive there myself. Being far closer than the hospital, I arrived before the ambulance. I rushed inside the apartment complex and barged through the unlocked door. There on the couch sat a man I presumed to be Jeremy, pale as a sheet, bleeding profusely from large gashes on each of his forearms. It was very apparent that he had slit his own wrist, and had simply sat himself down as he awaited rapidly approaching end. He looked at me with a fearful expression on his face. Who are you?" he said as he fell over, too weak from blood loss to keep himself upright. I grabbed a t-shirt off the floor and wrapped it as tightly around his arm as I could. Even with 3 layers, it hardly seemed to stop the bleeding. "Come on, don't do this to yourself. Stay with me," I said as I looked for something better to wrap his wound. Despite my best efforts, there was little I could do for him. Jeremy tried to sit himself up, but in his weakened state, he just kept slumping over. Then a light lit up in his eyes as he was hit with the realization that he wanted to keep living. A wish that came to him all too late. "Please help me," he said. "I don't want to die." Whatever trouble had led him to his stage, whatever had convinced him it would be better to leave the earth behind, he was wrong, and he knew it. But I couldn't help. And by the time the ambulance arrived, I'd watched yet another person's soul fade away. Over the next month, I'd receive another 7 messages, all with a signature, time, place, and name. 7 people destined to die alone and in pain. I tried everything I could think of to prevent their deaths. I called the police, but they could do little without any evidence something horrible was about to happen. Next, I attempted to reach out to the dying people, but to no avail. Not a single person accepted that I can provide them with future insight. By the time they had died, and the 8th number arrived, I long since decided to just ignore them. Why expose myself to the harsh reality of death if I can do nothing to help? Of course, that just happened to be the one time Anna was looking over some photos she'd taken of us together. The message interrupted her session, and she immediately started questioning me. Oddly enough, I had shut off notifications, yet the message still came to taunt me at the most inopportune time. "What's this?" she asked. I quickly snatched the phone out of her hand, but the damage was already done. What was that message?" she repeated sternly. It's nothing, honestly. It's just something from work," I lied poorly. "Alex, don't bullshit me. You've been acting weird for weeks." "It's true. my random disappearances, my denial that anything had been wrong. I couldn't hide it any longer. I don't. The words got stuck in my throat. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. I knew how suspicious it all seemed. I expected the accusations of cheating, a hidden drug addiction, or worse. But instead of questioning me further, she just took my hand and said, "Look, whatever is going on that you're too afraid to tell me, we'll get through it together." While we stood there, tears welling up in my eyes, someone knocked on the door. It was the police. "Alex Moore?" One of the police officers half-assed, half-stated. "We're here regarding the death of Julia Florence. We need to ask you some questions." I followed them without any hesitation, telling my wife to call our lawyer, but even with his help, no one could explain why I'd been at the scene of the death but not only Julia, but 7 other people. They questioned me for hours, and I could only provide few answers, though it was an extremely bizarre situation. Most evidence pointed towards the fact that I had been helping the victims and not killing them. In the end, they let me go, but the investigation was pending, and at any moment, they could have come for me. Once I returned back home, I'd already missed half the death of my 8th victim, whoever he was. He had died during my interrogation. I broke down, told my wife everything, but the investigation ended up with evidence going wrongfully against me. I needed her to know the truth. We sat down and I told her my story, went over each and every death I witnessed, and expressed the absolute hopelessness that had lingered over me for each and every day. It was an unbelievable story, but she didn't stop once to question the validity of what I just said. She just listened. When I finished talking, once all the facts were laid out on the table, she looked at me, her eyes glistening from tears forming in her eyes. "Alex, I'm so sorry," she said. That was it. No accusations, no follow-up questions regarding the validity of my story, just pure compassion. We kept talking throughout the night, where we would go from there, and how I dealt with watching all these people die. Then, as if a light bulb had been ignited between us, Anna came up with an idea. What if you're not supposed to save them?" I looked over at her, expectantly awaiting the next part of her suggestion. "What do you mean? Why else would I be sent their ways just moments before their deaths?" "What if you're just supposed to be there, by their side? Maybe all you're meant to do is give them some comforting words as they pass. I mean, you've tried everything possible to save them, but in the end, wouldn't they have just died alone if you weren't there?" I let her words sink in for a moment. It was an almost ludicrous idea, yet it gave me the most profound moment of peace. More bliss and hope than I'd felt in the past 2 months. She was right. There's no logic behind that feeling. But I knew it had to be true. So I patiently waited for the next message, and it wouldn't be long before it arrived. As it so happened, it would be my next-door neighbor, an elderly woman whose name I barely knew, but who I know had become a widow last year, after her husband had lost a long-winded battle with cancer. I walked over to her small house next to mine and knocked on her door, fully aware that she'd be dead in the next couple of hours. She was a lonely woman, eager to just have someone to talk to, and I regretted not spending more time with her before. She'd always been friendly to me, offering cake when she baked, asking about my work as I passed by in the mornings, but I'd always been too busy to appreciate it. I made no attempt at warning her about her ultimate fate. Instead, we just talked. She told me stories about her husband, and I just listened intently to each word she spoke. She smiled as the memories flowed back, ones of a life well spent, a happy one. As her time grew closer, she started feeling tired. I offered to make her some tea. By the time I came back, she'd fallen asleep, never to wake up again. On her face, I could see an expression of peace. I knew she hadn't been afraid. She'd been ready, and I hoped whatever afterlife existed, it would reunite her with her husband. From then, my curse became more of an ally. It was a job I had to do, to watch people in their last moments and comfort them as they left our world. I did my due diligence and alerted the authorities after each event. It was nothing more than an anonymous tip, enough to lead them to the scene, but not enough to add suspicion. I simply held their hands or gave them a few words of comfort. I tried getting close to them before their last hour, be it just to strike up a friendly conversation or to buy them a drink at the local pub. And most left with a look of acceptance, as if they trusted my assurances everything would be fine. Years went by, a whole decade of helping people pass peacefully to the other side. The power I'd called a curse so long ago had become a welcome gift. Then, in the late days of last year, as Christmas rolled up once again, me and Anna were wrapping presents for holiday festivities and family dinners. I'd gone almost a month without receiving another name. But that would end quickly, and I received another message that shattered my life with these simple words. Saturday, December 7th, 11:43 p.m. Anna Moore. I froze in place, stared at the name highlighted on my phone. Anna Moore. Anna Moore. I read it over and over again. Anna quickly noticed my absence from rapping and jolted me back to attention. "You got another name?" she asked. I nodded, not needing to speak another word for her to understand. The look of horror on my face said it all. "Oh, how long do I have?" she simply asked. Her normally cheerful voice turned dull and empty. We need to go to a hospital," I demanded, knowing fully well that preventing deaths was an impossible feat. "Alex, don't," she said before I cut her off. We can stop this. It doesn't have to happen." We argued for a bit. She seemed oddly calm throughout the discussion. In the end, she agreed to get a checkup, if only to calm me down. Of course, with a woman that appeared perfectly healthy, without as much as a cough, the doctors could only run her through basic tests. To look through anything substantial was a futile task, as most tests would take weeks to return, which was time we didn't have. In the end, we were sent home without a single answer. What if we leave? What if we get out of town for just a few days? Has any of the 100 people survived? She already knew the answer. I didn't even have to say it out loud. Without a place listed in the message, it became apparent that she'd meet her fate wherever she was. So we decided to make the best of what little time we had left. The following days, Anna stayed brave, putting up a beautiful facade of acceptance and joy. We reminisced about times long since past, looked over photos, and held each other for hours. At night, I could hear her cry in the living room, terrified not of what was to come, but what she'd leave behind. I did my best to comfort her. But there was something hidden under the layers of love and support. Resentment. I wish you never told me, she said. You should have just let me meet my death, ignorant like everyone else. She was right. I'd taken away one of the most beautiful things about life: uncertainty. The idea of our temporary, fleeting presence here on Earth. The fact that any moment might be our last. The thing that makes us so tragically wonderful, I'd taken it away. Despite that, she never stopped loving me. On her final day, she made a promise to never give up. There would be people that needed me after her demise. They would be alone in the final step of their life, and I couldn't let them down. Once her time came, it was nearing midnight. We both agreed not to mention her rapidly approaching death. She asked if we could go outside, just to look at the night sky one last time, to kiss under the moonlight, like we did on our first date. But it wasn't meant to be. No sooner had she stood up, she just collapsed on the floor with no warning. According to the doctors, my wife suffered deep vein thrombosis. Basically, a clot had formed in her leg, to subsequently break off, traveling all the way up to her lungs, while it caused a pulmonary embolism. Killed her within seconds. The love of my life had died, yet the names never stopped coming. I was depressed, broken, and without the will or follow orders, I wanted to ignore the names. But I'd made a promise to her to keep going. For the next 2 months, I chased down dying names as I got them. 5 victims that didn't have to suffer alone. I approached them, made them feel comfortable, and held their hand as they passed. But each name crossed off my list, took away chunks of my own soul. Without Anna to support me, I had no energy to keep going. I just had to wait until whoever ruled my life finally released me from my curse. So I did, up until last night, when I received another message, one that differed from the rest. This time, there's no names, no places, nor time. I was faced with nothing more than an innocuous question. Are you done? My mind raced. Such a simple but overwhelming question. What would happen if I said yes? Would I be finally free? I thought long and hard before deciding that I'd fulfill my duty, that my time had come to let go and let life happen the way it was meant to. Yes, I typed into the phone. Within a second, I got a response. Then it clicked, as if the past decade of my life suddenly made sense, or at least partially. Juliet, my first job, had not been only a random death. She'd chosen me as a successor, plunging me into a life herself lived. Why had she chosen me remained a mystery. Maybe we knew each other long ago, met once and the name stuck. Or maybe she picked me from a dusty phone book in her attic. But just like her, I'd been faced with the same dilemma. I thought about the implications of choosing another person to suffer the same fate as myself. But before I could consider a name, another message popped up. Sunday, 8:49 p.m., Hollow Street 7, Alex Moore. By quitting my job, I've effectively ended my own life. It's not fate I'm trying to escape, and I've already come to terms that I don't have much time left. Though I still have a few days to sort out my business, there's still one question that remains. Who's next? The trash is starting to pile up. The white bags look like snow piles on the corner by the door. No flies flutter about, but I swear I hear the buzz from time to time. The door won't open, It's sealed, cutting me off. The world outside is like a TV show. It's fuzzy and grimy, but people mill about on the sidewalks and in the grass, unknowing of what's going on behind the glass. The weather changes. It's raining today. No one can hear me if I scream. Windows won't break. They should. But even a chair just makes them shiver, which creates the sound of thin metal being warped back and forth. It sets my teeth on edge. Food here should be running out, but every few hours I hear glass shift in the fridge, and new items are there. At least, I think they're new. They're the same as what was there before. I'm sure I'd had finished them. Maybe not. Time just doesn't seem to have meaning anymore. Not since the clock on the wall stopped. I sort of missed that clock. It had to be broken and no. I started to hear words in the ticks. Get out if there is time. Soon, it will be here. Given time. It will never leave until it is time. I don't know if it was really talking. I know it shouldn't be able to, but I heard it. Now it lays on top of the snow pile of garbage, its face mocking me. I don't know when it got a face. It has one now, and I don't like it. The rain sounds terrible. 1,000 little feet are prancing about on every side of my apartment. I glance out the window from time to time to watch the water streak down the glass, and I swear it's writing to me as well. I can see words in the lines. Words that shouldn't be there, and yet, words they are. Alone. Silent. Reborn. I can't wipe them away because I can't open the windows. They stare at me even while I sit here typing this. I say stare, but they're just words, just ideas, thoughts, opinions from something that isn't real. I tell myself that the isolation is getting to me. I've even resorted to porn and masturbation just to pass the time, to get some kind of release. But is it passing? My hair is longer. I feel tired and sleepy, and the outside world is moving. But is it only day 10? My phone still works. I can read the text from my boyfriend. I can read things from my little sister asking for help on something. My messages never get out. Static fills my ears when I try to call. 911 is a sing-song voice that just keeps repeating. Thank you for calling. We are happy to assist you in these trying times. Please hold while we transfer you. It never transfers. Internet works still as well, but it acts like it's in a read-only mode. I can't post, I can't chat, I can't even upvote or downvote. Every site works, but like Windows, no one can hear or even know I've been there. I've watched more movies than I care to admit, but I have to keep track myself. The web apps don't seem to register when I watch something. Bills keep slipping in from under the door. I live in an apartment building and have a box for mail, but someone is putting them under my door. They're all past due, which means more time has passed than I think. I'm scared. I'm tired. I'm lonely. I think I'll go back to flick the bean again because I can't think straight right now. Day 15, day 20, day 500. I don't know. My phone says it's only been a few hours since I last wrote something here. The save time says the same, but time has passed. I slept for a long time, I'm sure of it. I don't feel well, not sick, but just wrong. Like something about my body is just misplaced. The smell from the garbage is making me gag. I've stuffed it in my chest with a few air fresheners. I don't think they'll help for long. I don't cook much anymore. The water from my sink is brown and stinks like someone had died in it. Snack wrappers litter the living room. Sometimes get the urge to get up and clean them, but in a few hours it's back to looking the same. I've started to feel sick all the time, more sick than before. It's my diet. I've gained a little weight. I can pinch my stomach now and my underwear fits differently. I don't wear pants too often. No bra either. What's the point? No one can see. No one is around to care. Starting to smell. My scalp is itchy. I have dandruff now. Never had it before. It's disgusting. I'll have to wash myself with bottled water if I ever do decide to get up. The rain hasn't stopped. I can't make out anything outside the windows now. It's a void filled with light flares and lines. I feel like something is out there, watching, waiting maybe. I try to draw the blinds, but they're up again a few minutes later. No noise, no movement. Just one moment they're down, and the next they're up again. The ceiling just started to leak. I've watched the water stains grow like spider webs across the yellow painting for some time now. The leak is by the door. I have a pan under it. The drip is maddening. I can hear it over headphones and loud music. The paint where the drip comes from is starting to bowl. It looks pregnant. Drip, drip, drip. Day, I don't know now. I'm not sleeping in my bed anymore. I got my period and I don't have tampons or pads. Blood like a stuck pig all over the sheets. Cramps are the worst part. Anyways, the dripping isn't as bad. The bulge has grown though. It hangs before the door, red and swollen. Something is alive inside. I can see it if I put a light up to it, like an egg. It scares me, and yet for some time, I sort of hope that it really is something. I'm still so lonely. I sometimes catch myself watching it while I eat. It shouldn't make me feel sick, but it's comforting in a way. The trash smell is coming down the hall like a summer breeze from a mass grave. Maybe it's me. I washed as much as I can, but a bath with a small towel isn't that helpful when you've run out of soap and shampoo. The closet door doesn't close anymore, though. I think it's the trash. I found a maggot in my food today. It was in the package of cookies I opened. I never saw one that was covered in red slime. I think it was blood if I didn't have so much recent experience with it. My flow is still pretty heavy. I squished the maggot and tossed it in the trash bag. Found 6 more. I ate the cookies anyway. I heard they're good for protein. Day, screw it all. I'm terrified. The bulge is gone. Just drapes of skin hang in front of the door. Blood spilled across the tile floor and had dried by the time I woke up. Whatever was inside was gone. My period has stopped. So the blood isn't from me. At least, I hope not. I hear something moving in the hallway. I sit on my couch and listen to it. Heavy footfalls move about. I have to pee. I just can't make myself go stand and look. The light in the hall flickers. I can hear discarded glass jars clang and plastic crinkle. It's in the closet with the trash. It's doing something. Whatever it is. I've peed in the bottle again. I have a collection going now. Anyway, the closet door was closed. A puddle of brown muck had bled into the carpet. I stepped in it in my hurry. It smells like a swamp. When I came back out the bathroom, the closet door was open. The trash bags were all torn apart, but mostly empty. I heard it in my bedroom. The bed springs creaked and I took off running back to the living room and shoved furniture in front of the opening. There's nowhere to go. This thing is in the apartment with me, trapped with me. I'm gonna die here. I know it. Day. I don't know. Furniture was moved while I slept. Black footprints led right up to the couch where I'd been sleeping. My clothes are wet with the same kind of slime that had covered the maggots. Flies are starting to appear. My clothes are wet with the same kind of slime that had covered the maggots. Flies are starting to appear. They keep buzzing around the room, fat as nickels, moving as hard. I feel sluggish, always tired. I don't even want to get up to clean the slime off. I hear the thing in my apartment in the closet again. The smell in the room is gone. I'm sure I just got used to it. I think I'll sleep some more. If the creature wants to eat me, then it can eat me and get me out of here. I woke up to someone sitting in the chair in the living room. It was dark. I couldn't see much of anything other than the silhouette made by the flickering of the TV. It didn't move, just sat there and watched. I also couldn't move. My legs felt like lead. I couldn't move my hips. The only part of me that still worked was my arms. Everything felt sticky. If I forced myself to move, pain rips through me, like I'm tearing my skin away from the couch. The thing got up and went down the hallway as I reached for the light behind me. With it on, I saw that I was tearing my skin away. My legs had fused with the couch. My hips were attached to the blanket that had laid under me. My lower half was covered in the slime, but it was now black and red. I was dissolving into the furniture. I screamed. I pulled myself free, the pain blinding. But I managed it and landed hard on the floor, bleeding again. More blood than I've ever seen before. I'm never leaving this apartment. I know that now. It's got me. Maybe I'm where I belong. The thing returned. I could see it as it entered into the room. It wore my clothes while everything looked wrong about it. I couldn't deny that it was me. A version of me. One that wasn't stuck inside for so long. Came around the coffee table to look at me. A look of disgust on her face. She said nothing, but pulled the blanket back from the couch with some effort and threw it over me. Stay there. It's where you're comfortable. I choked for a moment. What? What are you? I'm me. Who are you? She looked down at me and pushed back her hair. It was short, like mine had been. I'm you? I said for a lack of anything else entering my head. No, you're a part of this place now. Maybe one day you'll be reborn, when you're ready. She went to the door and pushed back the strings of flesh that hung before it. The sack was rotting, with no more effort than normal. She opened the door that had been sealed to me for what felt like forever. The door snapped closed behind her. I couldn't follow. I couldn't move. I can barely type this, but the internet is working again for some reason. Moving is still hard. Painful. She was right. I'm becoming a part of my apartment.